This content is rated Cherry Chili.
Level 1 Viewer versus Cherry Chili. Fight!
In the Battle of Cannae, Hannibal the Great, enemy of Rome, managed to not just outflank the Roman army, the biggest one Rome had ever raised, on two sides. He enveloped it from behind as well. This was a masterstroke of military strategy that had never been seen before, or since. Roman soldiers were squeezed together like cattle in a chute, unable to move or fight, all escape routes cut off, waiting to get their throats slit like so much meat in a slaughterhouse. Tens of thousands of Roman men died that day. It was the zenith of Hannibal's strategic triumph, the greatest battle ever won in human history, and the very moment Hannibal lost the war against Rome. Hannibal the Great, a man of mythic proportions, a general of legend, a cunning strategic genius, a man born to war. Like the last gunslinger in the Old West, a hero from a dying age. A man avenging the humiliating defeat of his nation by Rome, Hannibal fought for pride, for honor, for his father. To set the stage, we go back to the First Punic War. Carthage, located in North Africa, was the dominant naval power of the Western Mediterranean. Rome was a landlocked city, in a nation of citizen soldiers and farmers, men who had never even sailed, much less mastered naval warfare. Rome and Carthage came into conflict during a proxy war fought over Sicily. After having suffered a devastating defeat where much of their fledgling fleet was lost, Rome developed a tactic and a technology to turn the tide of battle. The corvus, a massive hooked gangplank that allowed them to attach to Carthaginian vessels and board, turning naval battles into infantry assaults. Using the corvus and reverse engineering Carthage's own naval technology, it took Rome 4 years to go from a nation with virtually no navy to its first victory at sea against the preeminent naval power of the age. Another 16 for Rome to win the war against Carthage. With this astounding feat, upstart Rome gave reigning heavyweight Carthage a black eye and humiliated its great general Hamilcar, father of Hannibal. Decades later, after his father's death, Hannibal, raised on a battlefield forged for war, marched over the Alps to invade Rome. It's almost as if he wanted more than simple revenge. He wanted to beat the Romans at what they did best, as they had beaten Carthage. And so he marched war elephants over mountains and cut deep into the flesh of Rome, in a campaign so bloody, forever after Romans called him Cruel Hannibal. When I was 6, I used to play a card game called Old Maid with my family. The point of Old Maid is to avoid being the last person with the Old Maid card. I was the first of the grandkids. My youngest relatives at the time were my twin uncles, both 12 years older than myself. I was often the only child in a group of adults. My strategy to win at Old Maid was simple. I would take the Old Maid card and make sure that it was pushed up above all the other cards, so my opponents obviously had no choice but to take the card closest to them. Hey, I was 6. What can I say? Of course, when my opponents refused to take the Old Maid card, I had basically screwed myself out of a win by showing them which card they needed to avoid in the future. Hannibal's overall strategy was identical to mine. To explain, let me simplify the political will of Rome during Hannibal's campaign against them into 2 camps. The don't take the bait camp, and the Rome's pride demands we fight camp. The don't take the bait camp strategy would be to avoid battling Hannibal directly and simply squeeze him out of Italy by cutting off his supply lines and harrying him constantly. As Hannibal won victory after victory, the don't take the bait camp grew until Hannibal won the ultimate military victory, proving to all Rome that he was the superior warrior. And then everyone in Rome was in the don't take the bait category, and Hannibal lost. Hannibal must have thought that delivering the ultimate defeat in battle would cause the Romans to surrender. Once he convinced them of his incredible military prowess, they would flock to bow before him, throwing their senatorial rings at his feet. Instead, his military victories only galvanized Rome against rising to his bait. When the Romans had a choice between their pride and Rome, they chose Rome. They chose to do anything to keep their country alive and free, even if it was humiliating. Like 6-year-old me, Hannibal was the architect of his own downfall. But unlike 6-year-old me, Hannibal didn't just invest one playing card into his gambit. He marched 40 elephants and tens of thousands of men into a no-win scenario. A no-win scenario that should have been easy to spot if he, or anyone advising him, thought to walk through the logic at any point. In his malaria-infested, plunge-to-your-death crossing the Alps, fighting treacherous Gauls, killing half of your army and 39 of your 40 elephants, 2-year forced march. Your plan is to bait the Romans into fighting you until they destroy themselves. What if they don't take the bait, mate? The real question isn't, why did Hannibal lose? Was it his lack of support from Carthage? Was it the fact that siege warfare wasn't really his jam? Was it the influence of fairies? No, the real question is, why did Hannibal ever think he could win in the first place? And that question is the thread that, when pulled, unravels all of human history.
In the next episode of Deprogramming Women.
In 1905, a British shopkeep named Paul Webb received a letter from a dying Spanish revolutionary named Luis Ramos, who had been betrayed by his cause and imprisoned. Ramos beseeched Webb from his jail cell.
I feel that my life is going away. I have made my will, by which I name my daughter my only heiress, appointing you her guardian. All I need from you is 59 pounds to release her.
Of course, everything in that letter was a lie. The story of Ramos was part of the Spanish prisoner con, an older version of the Nigerian prince scam. This type of swindle has persisted for millennia, and that very persistence invites a question. How did we as a species ever come to rely on something so unreliable as words? Did you enjoy this content? Did you find it enlightening? Would you like to see more of it? If so, please consider becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/HoneyBadgerRadio. Additional options for monthly and one-time support can be found at www.feedthebadger.com.